The silence was the first thing that hit me. Not the kind of quiet you get after a long day, when the world exhales and you can finally hear your own breathing. This was different. This was the kind of silence that sat heavy in your chest. The kind that made you feel like you were intruding in your own life. I closed the door behind me and stood still. The keys in my hand jingled, louder than I remembered them ever being. I almost apologized out loud. To the walls, maybe. To the ghost of the life that used to live here. The apartment looked smaller now. Bare. Echoey. The couch was gone. The rug. The plants. The bookshelf that used to lean slightly to the left. Even the prints on the wall, that overpriced abstract art she insisted made the place feel cultured, all vanished. What remained were faint outlines where frames used to hang and little indentations in the carpet, like fossils. She'd taken almost everything. And I'd let her. Because after the third court date, and the fifth call from her lawyer, and the 27th sleepless night, I was just too tired. Tired of fighting someone who made war look like breakfast. Tired of defending myself against things I didn't say, things I didn't do, emotions I didn't show in the right way. I walked into the kitchen. The fridge was humming but empty. A half-full bottle of mustard sat awkwardly in the door, next to one shriveled lime and an expired yogurt I didn't recognize. I closed it. There was a cup of instant ramen on the counter, unopened. I hadn't bought it. She must have left it. Or maybe it had always been there. One last edible relic of what used to be. I opened the cabinets. Empty. Even the wine glasses were gone. Not that I needed them. I didn't drink anymore. Not since the night she said I was unpredictable and stormed out. I'd been nursing tea and guilt ever since. I wandered over to the small desk by the window. It still had my files, environmental surveys, soil quality reports, some pay stubs. I ran my hand over them. The paper felt thinner than usual. Then I opened the top drawer. It stuck for a second, swollen wood or stubborn memory, I couldn't tell. I yanked it gently, and it slid open with a sigh. Inside was a mess. Old pens, dead batteries, paper clips tangled in elastic bands. A pair of sunglasses I hadn't worn in 2 years. And there, lying face down in the corner, was an old phone. My previous work phone. She hated that one. Said it made me look cheap. I almost chuckled. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered, dimmed, then pulsed awake. 43% battery. I swiped through the apps, outdated, glitchy, but the voice memos were still there. That app had always been useful during site visits when I needed to dictate field notes. There were dozens of recordings, muffled audio from project sites, the occasional reminder to buy groceries, one labeled Miriam's Dance Recital from 3 years ago. I paused on that one. I didn't open it. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not yet. I kept scrolling, my thumb moving like it belonged to someone else. Then I stopped. March 3rd, custody talk. It was in Vanessa's handwriting. She'd renamed it when she'd used the phone once. I remembered now. She'd borrowed it that day after her own phone died. She needed to call the mediator and take notes. I'd told her to use the memo app. Funny how the smallest things, an outdated phone, a forgotten app, can sit quietly in a drawer, holding something that might still have weight. My heart thudded, slow and uncertain. I stared at the title. Custody talk. That had been a brutal week. The week she accused me of emotional instability. The week she insisted I was a risk to our daughter because I took too long to respond to texts and had once forgotten to buy the right allergy medication. I pressed play. The recording began with rustling. A chair sliding back. Then her voice, low and tight. Just say what I told you to say, okay? If they ask, you were scared. Not of him, just uncomfortable. I froze. There was more. A pause. Then the soft voice of our daughter, almost inaudible. But Daddy didn't yell. Vanessa again. Firmer. I know, sweetie. But it'll help us. Just trust me. Say it like we practiced. My finger hovered over the pause button, but I couldn't move. The words hung in the air like ash. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. Not even sad. I just felt awake. Like a fog had lifted. Like the silence that had been swallowing me whole just made space for something else. I set the phone down, gently, like it might break. She took everything except this. Except the one thing that might still matter. I didn't move for a long time. The phone sat on the table, screen dark now, like it had just confessed something and couldn't bear to look me in the eye. I didn't press play again. I didn't need to. Every word was already burned into my memory, her voice, calm and calculated, explaining to our daughter how to play her part. My daughter's confusion, her quiet resistance, the subtle way Vanessa redirected her. Like she'd done it before. I sank into the one remaining chair at the table. My fingers tapped against the wood. I stared at the walls. I wasn't sure what I felt. Not rage. That would have been easy. It was something slower, heavier, like a betrayal I had already accepted finally showing me its full shape. I reached for the phone again and played the recording from the beginning. This time, I listened all the way through. It was about 8 minutes long. In that short span, Vanessa managed to gently, expertly construct a narrative that she wanted our daughter to repeat, one that mirrored the claims in her custody affidavit. "He forgets things," she said. "He zones out sometimes. He gets quiet when he's angry." That's scary for a kid, right? She wasn't yelling. She wasn't frantic. She was calm. Controlled. That made it worse. She knew exactly what she was doing. And I'd been too exhausted to see it then. When the audio stopped, the silence returned. Not the same one from earlier. This was sharper. Tense. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I opened my laptop, the one thing she hadn't bothered to touch because she thought everything I needed was in my cloud accounts. She was mostly right. But she forgot how old habits linger, how I never deleted local backups, how I always synced my devices manually. I typed, "Can audio recordings be used in family court California?" into the search bar. The first few results were vague. Then I found an article from a legal advice site. In California, both parties must consent to a recording unless there's a reasonable expectation of no privacy. But if the recording was made on my phone, in our shared home, and Vanessa used it herself. I squinted. That might be different. I clicked another link. It was a forum. A father describing a situation almost identical to mine. Responses varied. Some told him it wouldn't be admissible. Others said it might be, especially if it wasn't recorded secretly. A few even mentioned it could be used in an ethics complaint if the speaker was a licensed attorney. That stopped me. Vanessa. She was an officer of the court. She had filed a sworn statement, an affidavit, and this recording directly contradicted what she claimed. Coercion. Perjury. Manipulation of a minor witness. The terms ran through my head like puzzle pieces I wasn't sure how to fit together. I saved the file in 3 different folders. Uploaded it to my cloud storage. Then emailed it to myself. Twice. And still, my hands trembled. Not because of fear, not yet, but because I realized, for the first time since the divorce, I wasn't entirely powerless. I had something. Something that hadn't been taken. Something that wasn't just a memory or a regret. A fact. A mistake. One she didn't realize she'd made. But what did I want to do with it? Did I want to destroy her? No, that wasn't it. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want headlines. I didn't want to feed the part of me that fantasized about courtroom explosions and dramatic reversals. That wasn't real life. What I wanted was a way back. Not to her, but to myself. To my daughter. To the version of me that hadn't been erased by red ink and custody filings and cold courtroom stares. I looked at the phone again. At the screen. At the timestamp. March 3rd. The day before the affidavit was filed. Her voice was crystal clear. I sat back, exhaled slowly, and whispered to no one, "This isn't over." It took me a week to work up the nerve. I'd saved the recording in so many places, I started to worry more about losing my mind than the file. I wasn't sleeping much. I'd wake up thinking I'd dreamt it all, then listen again just to make sure I hadn't made it up. Every time I heard her voice coaching our daughter, the numbness cracked just a little more. I was tired of being careful, but I knew I had to be smart. A friend, well, an old coworker I still exchanged the occasional email with, told me about a small legal aid clinic near Lake Merritt. Run by younger lawyers, public service types. Not the kind of place that handled revenge or custody wars, but people who knew how the system worked when you didn't have the money to bend it. I walked in on a Wednesday morning. The waiting room was full of fluorescent light and uncomfortable chairs. A bulletin board sagged with flyers in 4 languages. Know your tenant rights. What to do if ICE comes knocking. Free will clinics for seniors. I was definitely in the right kind of wrong place. A receptionist handed me a clipboard without asking questions. I filled out the form. Under legal issue, I just wrote, need advice. Family court matter. Audio recording may be relevant. I handed it back. She gave a nod that said, you're not the first. An hour later, they called my name. Her office was small, tidy, unadorned. 1 bookshelf. A diploma from Stanford. A half-empty mug of tea. She stood as I entered, early 30s, maybe younger, dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense braid. Her handshake was firm, but not performative. Sarah Iqbal, she said. You're Daniel. I nodded. She didn't ask me to explain everything. Just said, start where it feels right. So I told her. About the divorce. The affidavit. The recording. The moment I found it. I didn't dramatize. I didn't editorialize. I just laid it out, like pieces on a board. She listened without interrupting. Not even a nod. Just the occasional jot of a note in her slim black notebook. When I finished, she asked only one question. Can I hear the recording? I handed her the phone. She put in headphones, closed her eyes, and listened. Her expression didn't change, no raised brows, no gasps. Just quiet absorption. When it ended, she set the phone down gently, like it contained something fragile. Okay, she said. Let's talk. She explained things in plain English. Not in the way people dumb things down, but in the way someone who respects your intelligence does when they know you're operating from the outside. She told me what the recording was and, more importantly, what it wasn't. It likely won't be admissible in custody court directly, she said. The judge might hear it, might not. But what's important here isn't the custody claim. It's the affidavit. And the fact that your ex-wife is a practicing attorney. I didn't follow at first. She submitted a sworn statement. Under penalty of perjury. And if this recording contradicts the spirit or the letter of that statement and shows coaching of a minor witness, that's a violation of legal ethics. Especially coming from someone with a license. So this isn't about getting my daughter back. She shook her head. Not yet. This is about establishing misconduct. Quietly. Properly. Procedurally. The word sat with me, procedurally. Not vengeance. Not drama. A process. Sarah opened a manila folder and wrote my name on it. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a checklist. We'll build a file, she said. Document chain of custody for the recording. Date stamps. Context. We'll pair it with the affidavit and a timeline. We'll submit a complaint to the bar first. If they open an inquiry, the family court may follow. But we don't lead with fire. We lead with facts. I nodded slowly. I wasn't used to being on steady ground. I'd forgotten how it felt. Sarah looked at me. Not like a victim. Not like a man who'd lost. But like someone who'd just taken their first legal breath in months. You don't need to win everything today, she said. You just need the truth on record. For the first time in a long time, I believe someone. The first sign that Vanessa knew came in the form of an email. Not from her directly, of course. She hadn't spoken to me since the final court date, just cold glances across the parking lot during pickups, all business, no soul. This came from her attorney, a partner at one of those firms with names that sound like British aristocrats, Hawthorne, Beckett, and Lane. The subject line was clinical, ongoing custody and related matters. But the tone? That was pure Vanessa. The body of the message outlined growing concerns over unsubstantiated communications with third parties regarding sealed court documents and privileged family matters. It ended with a warning, not explicit, but sharp enough. If I continued to mischaracterize events or distribute material defamatory in nature, they would seek sanctions. Possibly damages. They never mentioned the recording by name. That told me everything I needed to know. She'd heard. I forwarded the email to Sarah. She replied within the hour. No panic. No dramatic language. Just, this is posturing. We stay the course. The next morning, Sarah filed a preliminary motion. It wasn't a demand for custody or a dramatic reversal. It was a procedural request, a motion to amend the affidavit previously submitted by Vanessa, citing newly surfaced evidence suggesting potential inaccuracies that may compromise the integrity of the court's findings. It was brilliant in its restraint. We weren't attacking her. We were inviting the court to correct itself. A week passed. Vanessa didn't respond, at least not to me. But I felt her presence, like a sudden drop in barometric pressure. The tension came in small ways. An extra-long stare at pickup. The fact that she didn't say a word to our daughter in front of me anymore. Silence as weaponry. Then came a second letter from her attorney. This one was shorter. Angrier. It accused me of harassment by procedure. It implied I was using legal aid services to circumvent proper channels and relitigate settled matters. It concluded by stating Vanessa categorically denies all allegations, including any suggestion of impropriety in her affidavit. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Categorically denies. Like it was all neat. Clean. Sanitized. I wondered if she'd listened to the recording since I found it. I wondered if she flinched at her own voice. Or if she was so certain of the walls she'd built that she didn't even care anymore. Sarah wasn't surprised by the letter. "She's trying to intimidate you back into silence," she said. "It's common when people feel the ground shift." That made me pause. The ground was shifting? I hadn't felt it yet. I still lived in the same half-empty apartment. Still ate instant noodles some nights. Still picked up my daughter every other weekend like I was borrowing her from a museum. But something was moving. Something quiet. A war had begun. Not loud. Not public. Not the kind with screaming matches or custody battles waged in tabloids. This was a paper war. A war of timelines, of footnotes, of procedural filings and legal posture. I wasn't fighting to win back everything I lost. I was fighting to make sure none of it had been taken through a lie. That mattered more than I realized. And now, Vanessa knew that I wasn't folding this time. Courtrooms always feel colder than they should. It wasn't the temperature. The vents whispered warm air into the space, but the atmosphere. Dry. Controlled. Stripped of emotion by design. Like feelings were a liability here. I sat at the table next to Sarah, my hands clasped under the table to keep them from fidgeting. Across from us sat Vanessa and her attorney, Mr. Beckett, salt and pepper hair, expensive pen, eyes that didn't blink enough. Vanessa looked the same as always. Perfect posture, matte lipstick, no visible nerves. She even smiled at the clerk as if she were walking into a fundraiser, not a hearing to address her own potential misconduct. The judge was already seated when we entered. A woman in her 60s with clear-framed glasses and a tired voice, the kind that made you feel like she'd heard every excuse imaginable and didn't have patience for even one more. She flipped through the documents in front of her as the clerk read out the case number. I didn't recognize my own life in the way it was spoken, docketed, categorized, flattened. Then Sarah stood. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't push. It simply filled the room with precision. "Your Honor, we're not here to relitigate custody," she began. "We are here because a sworn affidavit submitted to this court on March 4th may have been materially influenced by coaching of a minor witness. My client has come into possession of an audio recording dated March 3rd. We are requesting the court unseal this recording for review in chambers." Vanessa's attorney immediately rose. "Objection. This is improper, irrelevant, and, frankly, defamatory. This court has already ruled. This is harassment by legal technicality." The judge held up a hand, not even looking up. "Counselor, sit." Beckett hesitated, then obeyed. The judge turned to Sarah. "You're saying this recording directly contradicts sworn testimony?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." It's brief, but explicit. The voice of Ms. Ross, instructing her daughter to give answers aligned with statements made in the affidavit. There was a silence then. Heavy and expectant. I glanced at Vanessa. She smirked, just slightly. The kind of smirk you wear when you think you know the rules better than anyone else in the room. When you think the outcome is already decided. But the judge leaned back, expression unreadable. "Do you have the recording with you?" Sarah reached into her folder and handed over a sealed envelope. Certified transcript and a digital file on a secure USB. Timestamped. The metadata has been authenticated. Another pause. Then, "I'll review it in chambers." Both parties are to remain in the building. Vanessa's smirk didn't disappear, but it thinned. The judge stood, files in hand, and disappeared behind the door marked private. The click of it closing sounded louder than anything else in the room. We waited. 15 minutes. Maybe 20. I didn't check. I stared at the grain of the wood in front of me, listening to the sound of my breath, my heartbeat, the faint ticking of the courtroom clock. Vanessa never looked at me. She just sat still, arms crossed, her leg bouncing in perfect rhythm, a tell she didn't realize she still had. Her lawyer whispered something to her at one point. She didn't respond. When the door opened again, the judge returned without ceremony. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at Vanessa. Ms. Ross, I want to remind you that officers of this court are held to a higher ethical standard, not only in their representations, but in their conduct outside of formal proceedings. Vanessa blinked. Once. Her mouth opened, just slightly, but no words came out. The judge turned to Sarah. I will be issuing a written opinion regarding the recording's impact on this court's prior findings. In the meantime, I am unsealing the audio and ordering a review by the child custody evaluator. No dramatics. No gasps. Just procedure. Vanessa didn't speak, but her eyes weren't still anymore. The hearing ended with the slam of a gavel and the shuffle of paper. But I didn't move, because I'd seen it. For the first time in months, she wasn't in control. The memo came 2 days later. It wasn't dramatic. Just a PDF, scanned and sent to Sarah from the court's administrative email. No bold lettering, no exclamation marks. But it landed with the weight of a falling ceiling. The judge had ordered a secondary review of the original custody ruling, citing material irregularities in submitted evidence. The phrasing was surgical, almost bloodless, but if you knew how to read between the lines, it was an alarm bell. Sarah read it with a kind of quiet satisfaction. She's opening the door, she said. Not kicking it in, but definitely unlocking it. Vanessa didn't call. She didn't email. But within a week, things began to shift. First came the delay in her law firm's newsletter. She used to be featured in every other issue. Top 5 rising women in litigation, that sort of thing. But her name didn't show up in the next one. Then I saw a LinkedIn update. Her profile no longer listed partner track. Just senior associate. Small edits. Subtle omissions. But they said enough. A friend of mine, someone I'd met through a mediation support group, worked in corporate HR and had a cousin at Beckett and Lane. They're distancing, she told me, almost apologetically. She's still technically there. But she's radioactive right now. I didn't smile. Because there was nothing satisfying about it. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like erosion. Slow. Impersonal. The kind that happens when people who once shook your hand now look past you in the hallway. Meanwhile, the court-appointed custody evaluator called to schedule a home visit. That hadn't happened in months, not since the original ruling when Vanessa painted my apartment as chaotic and emotionally unstable. Back then, her word had been enough. Now, they wanted to see for themselves. I cleaned everything, but not too much. Sarah warned me not to stage anything. They know what unnatural looks like, she said. Be yourself. Just your organized self. The evaluator arrived on a Saturday morning. A calm woman in her 50s, clipboard in hand, no nonsense in her tone. She asked polite questions. Inspected the space. Asked about routines, my daughter's habits, my emotional stability since the divorce. I told her the truth, not the flattering version. Just the real one. At the end of the visit, she paused by the door. You know, she said, not looking up from her notes, you don't strike me as the kind of man described in the original affidavit. I didn't reply, but my chest stayed warm the rest of the day. The following week, an interim order was issued, expanded visitation rights. 3 weekends a month instead of 2. A midweek overnight. No more supervised calls. The document was dry, but I read it 3 times, just to make sure it was real. Vanessa's response came via text. Not through her lawyer. Not with formal punctuation or legal decorum. We need to talk about this. It's getting out of hand. I didn't respond. Because for the first time, it wasn't me who was losing control. I saw her during the next handoff. She didn't wear sunglasses like she usually did. Her hair wasn't as perfectly arranged. She barely made eye contact. My daughter ran into my arms without hesitation, no cautious glance back, no whispered reminder to be careful with what she said. We walked to the car slowly, hand in hand. I looked back once. Vanessa stood by her car, arms folded, staring at the pavement like it had betrayed her. I used to think power meant who won the argument, who got the last word, who walked away with the ruling in their favor. But now I was starting to understand real power is what happens when you stay quiet long enough for the truth to echo. And echoes, once they start, don't stop easily. Sarah called it just paperwork. But it didn't feel like that. I sat across from her in the same tidy office where this had all begun. The desk looked no different. The mug of tea was still half full. But something had shifted. The air was thicker now, less like bureaucracy, more like consequence. This isn't retaliation, Sarah reminded me. It's procedure. She slid the document across the table. 6 pages. Double-spaced. Calmly worded. No fire. No vengeance. Just facts, dates, quotes, file references. The audio transcript was attached as an exhibit, along with the affidavit it contradicted. Every sentence was precise. Cold in the way that truth has to be when it enters a system built to deny emotion. The bar isn't in the business of punishing people for being messy humans, Sarah said. But they do act when officers of the court violate trust. She lied, Daniel. Not just to you. To the court. To the system. I nodded slowly, but part of me still hesitated. What happens to her? I asked. Sarah didn't blink. That's not your responsibility. I signed the form. The complaint was submitted that afternoon. A quiet upload to a server in Sacramento. No explosions. No courtrooms. No confrontations. Just a digital whisper that would, if it found traction, start pulling on the threads of her professional life. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my sister. I didn't want congratulations. I wasn't even sure I wanted results. What I wanted, what I still couldn't quite name, was recognition. Not headlines or drama. Just to be seen. For someone, somewhere, in some official capacity, to say, you were right. What happened to you wasn't fair. And it wasn't your fault. The bar doesn't move fast. Weeks passed. Then a letter arrived, addressed to Sarah, but she forwarded me a copy. They were opening a preliminary inquiry. Not a trial. Not a judgment. Just a review. That was enough. Behind the scenes, I began to hear things. A former paralegal from Vanessa's firm posted cryptic updates on social media. Tough month in the office. Things unravel fast when you bet on the wrong horse. A mutual acquaintance, one of those LinkedIn-only connections who never liked any of my posts, sent me a vague message. Hey, if you ever want to talk, I think I owe you an apology. I didn't reply, because it wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't even about her. It was about the system she had once used like a scalpel, clean, confident, precise, now turning itself slowly back toward her. A quiet storm had begun. Not the kind that makes the news. The kind that makes phone calls stop being returned. That makes senior partners start using phrases like reputational risk. That makes lawyers look over their shoulder before inviting you to a deposition. Sarah stayed calm throughout. Always precise. Always grounded. You don't need to fight fire with fire, she told me once. Sometimes all you need is to prove who brought the match. And maybe that was the real win. Not watching her fall, but knowing she couldn't make me disappear anymore. She ran to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders, and her curls trailed behind her in the breeze. I bent down instinctively, arms open, and she collided into me with a softness that knocked the air from my chest in the best possible way. Hi, Daddy. Hi, Peanut. We didn't say much more than that at first. I took her hand, small and warm, and we walked toward the park just a few blocks from my place. The afternoon was overcast, but the air was gentle. No sharp winds. No tension. Just gray sky, green trees, and the easy rhythm of sneakers on pavement. She wanted ice cream before anything else. Chocolate swirl with rainbow sprinkles. I didn't object. We sat on a weathered bench near the swing sets, our cones dripping onto napkins folded twice. I watched her concentrate as she tried to catch a stubborn drip before it reached her knuckles. Her face had changed, fuller cheeks, new freckles. I wondered how many moments I'd missed that I didn't even know to grieve. "How's school?" I asked. She shrugged, mouth full. "Okay. Miss Patterson says I talk too much during reading time." I smiled. "You've always had a lot to say." She glanced up at me, eyes soft. "Do you talk to Mom a lot?" The question came like a gentle breeze, not an accusation. Just curiosity. I thought for a second before answering. "Not much. Just when we need to." She nodded, satisfied. There was a silence, but not an awkward one. Just two people sitting with space between their words. After a while, she set her cone down carefully on the bench and picked at a piece of grass near her shoe. "You know," she said, almost like she was talking to herself, "Mom used to tell me not to say certain things." Like, back then, when people were asking questions. I didn't move. She kept plucking at the grass. She said it was just to help. That if I said the wrong thing, it would make stuff harder. I looked out toward the swing set. A toddler squealed as his father gave him a gentle push. Birds chirped in the hedges. Life moved. I turned back to her and nodded slowly. "I know," I said. She didn't ask me to explain. I didn't ask her to say more. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a breakthrough. It was just a piece of quiet honesty that had waited long enough to be spoken. We sat there a while longer, letting the ice cream melt and the breeze pass through our sleeves. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I just listened. And that felt like enough. The investigation became official on a Monday. Sarah forwarded me the letter from the bar. Formal language. Dry phrasing. A full inquiry into possible violations of Rule 5 to 200 and Rule 8.4 concerning truthfulness and conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice. I had to read it twice to realize what it really meant. They were taking it seriously. I didn't feel triumphant. No rush of adrenaline. Just stillness. A quiet confirmation that I hadn't imagined the last year of my life. That what happened wasn't just personal failure or emotional weakness. It had structure. It had evidence. And now it had consequence. Vanessa didn't say anything right away. But I heard things. A mutual acquaintance told me she'd been removed from a major client's litigation team. Not fired. Just reassigned. Another friend mentioned she wasn't showing up to firm events anymore. She's laying low, they said. Lots of internal whispers. People don't know what's real and what's not. That was the thing about trust. It doesn't explode, it erodes. Quietly. Like a leak beneath the floorboards. You don't notice until the foundation softens, and suddenly the house groans under its own weight. 2 weeks later, I got the email. Subject line, custody discussion, private offer. It came directly from Vanessa. No lawyer copied. Just her. Short and polite. She proposed revisiting the custody agreement, offering joint legal custody and increased physical time with our daughter in exchange for closing all pending matters and avoiding future escalation. I read it 3 times. There was no apology, no admission, just leverage. A deal. She still thought this was a game of pieces, not principles. I didn't respond right away. I forwarded the message to Sarah. She called me that afternoon. "It's your choice," she said. "But just know, if you accept, there's no formal record. No accountability. It just disappears." I sat with that. A year ago, I might have taken it. Out of exhaustion. Out of fear. For the sake of peace, or what I thought peace meant. But now? I emailed Vanessa back. 2 lines. "I'm pursuing everything through formal channels. Custody can be revisited through court procedure. No off-record agreements." She didn't reply. I saw her at the next pickup. Her makeup was still immaculate, but her eyes didn't hold the same edge. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her posture. A pause right before she handed over the backpack. She looked like someone who was still trying to play a part in a script that had moved on without her. I said thank you. Nothing more. Because the victory wasn't in the moment. It was in the refusal. The refusal to be bought off. To be quieted. To trade dignity for convenience. If there was going to be justice, it would be public. It would be procedural. It would be by the same rules she once twisted. That's what I wanted now. Not revenge. Not even punishment. Just for the record to reflect the truth. And that meant walking the long road, even when she tried to hand me a shortcut. The final hearing wasn't cinematic. There were no raised voices, no dramatic objections, no last-minute twists. Just a quiet courtroom on a gray Thursday morning, the kind of day where everything felt muted: weather, voices, expectations. Sarah sat beside me, her legal pad mostly blank. We'd prepared for months, but there was nothing left to argue. Everything had already been filed, reviewed, and weighed. The judge had read the reports, listened to the audio, considered the ethics investigation still unfolding behind the scenes. Today was just confirmation. When the ruling came, I almost missed it. The judge read from a sheet of paper in a flat voice. This court grants joint legal custody to both parents and revises the physical custody schedule accordingly. No gavel slam. No eye contact. Just a sentence. Sarah leaned over and whispered, "It's done." I nodded. Vanessa was across the room, stiff and silent. She didn't speak to the judge. Didn't look at me. Her lawyer gathered their papers quickly, like someone trying to exit a room without touching anything. As the session ended, I stood and walked to the bench. The judge looked up, surprised. I extended my hand. She hesitated, then shook it. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for listening." She nodded. No speech. No lecture. Just a small gesture, one professional to another. One person acknowledging another's endurance. Outside the courthouse, I sat on a stone bench beneath a leafless tree. The sky hung low and heavy, the air cold enough to sting but not freeze. I pulled out the old phone, the one I hadn't touched since the first hearing. The file was still there. March 3rd, custody talk. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over it, not quite ready. This recording had changed everything. It had exposed what needed exposing. It had protected my daughter. It had reminded me that truth, when documented and respected, could still matter. But it had also haunted me. I'd replayed it in my head at night. Not her voice, mine. The silence. The things I didn't do, didn't say. The months I spent doubting myself, thinking I was the problem. The file had power, but it also carried weight. And I didn't want to carry it anymore. I tapped delete. The screen asked me to confirm. I did. Gone. Just like that. No drama. No final blow. Just a quiet erasure of something that had already done its job. I stood, adjusted my coat, and began walking. My daughter's school was only 6 blocks away. I hadn't told her about the hearing. She didn't need to know the details. All she would know is that I'd be picking her up more often now. More Saturdays. More Tuesday dinners. More bedtime stories read from the wrong voices, with the right heart. I turned the corner and saw the school gates in the distance. Kids pouring out, backpacks bouncing, voices high and happy. She spotted me before I called her name. Her face lit up. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Not triumph. Not victory. Just peace. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that simply walks beside you as you head home.